Thank you very much. We're going to go now to Chad Blair, who has a question for the governor.
Thank you, Paula. Governor, what role should the federal government play in education? Are programs like No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top working? Why or why not?
I think the federal government does have a role to play in a very specific way. I think that the federal government should set a standard for America as to what each child should know when they graduate from high school, what they should know about American history, their math skills that they should have. I can see a national standard as other nations set a national standard. But remember, no one in the Department of Education teaches even one child from Washington, D.C. That's done on the local level. I like local control. I think there are some federal programs that do work. I was a volunteer reading tutor for 10 years at Makawao Elementary School in the Chapter 1 reading program. This Title I reading was for students who came from low-income families who needed extra help. So I would tutor them one-on-one, and the money for that program came from the federal government. So I can see some of the programs work really well, but I like control to be at the local level.
A quick follow-up, if I may, Paula. Do you think Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind are working? Why or why not?
Well, I think it remains to be seen if Race to the Top is going to work here in Hawaii. It was my office that worked with the Department of Education to secure the $75 million that we got. Mark Anderson from my office was the liaison with Catherine Matayoshi at the Department of Education. And it was the STEM, the robotics programs, that the feds really liked a lot. So I do think it has a potential to work, but it remains to be seen.
Thank you very much. Representative Hirono, your rebuttal.
As an immigrant to this country, I certainly understand the importance of education as a great equalizer, because otherwise I wouldn't be standing here today. So I have a commitment to make our public schools as strong as they can be, as good as they can be, to enable our kids to succeed in school and in life. Now, I have this commitment to our public schools, and I know my Republican opponent has said so, but who can forget that during her watch we had Furlough Fridays. You know, when we talk about strengthening our schools, they need to be in our schools. Furlough Fridays, our kids were shortchanged 17 instructional days. That's not what a person who supports education would do. And who can also forget the fact that all these parents who were so concerned about Furlough Fridays wanting to meet with her and being escorted out of her office because she wouldn't meet with them.
Representative, Furlough Fridays is a state issue. I'm talking about federal education. The same question to you as to the governor, your support or problems with No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top.
There certainly is a federal role for education, Chad, and the Republican Ryan budget cuts education support by some 30%. That would leave even more of a burden on the states to close the achievement gap, which is what the Race to the Top was all about. So there is a federal collaborative role with education. This is not about the federal government top-down telling the states what to do.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go now to Andrew with a question for Representative Hirono.
Representative Hirono, let's go back about a decade. In the 2002 election, you were running for governor after serving 2 consecutive terms as lieutenant governor, but you lost to Linda Lingle, and she became the first Republican governor in 40 years. Why do you think you can defeat her in this statewide race?
Well, times have changed in 10 years, and we now have my Republican opponent with a record, and she has a mixed record. Who can forget Furlough Fridays on her watch, or the Super Ferry fiasco, or the fact that 2,000 jobs were lost when Aloha Airlines went under, direct jobs, while she sat on her hands. And by the time she left office, Hawaii was 48th in the nation in terms of welcoming businesses. This even after when she first ran, she said, Hawaii is open for business. So this is a mixed record. Now, I am very proud of the fact that I supported Obamacare that is helping millions of people all across our country, seniors and young people. And I also fought to make sure Hawaii's prepaid health care law, my amendment, was included in Obamacare in the House. I'm also proud of the fact that I brought in $6 million for our airports, working with a Republican-controlled House to do that.
All right, thank you very much, Representative. Governor, you have a 45-second rebuttal.
Congresswoman Hirono mentioned Furlough Fridays a couple of times, And as she knows, no governor can furlough any Department of Education employee. There's an article in Honolulu Magazine that cites that and said Hirono's campaign conveniently leaves this fact out, and it debunks everything she just said about furlough Fridays. It's simply not true. However, when she was lieutenant governor, she walked the picket line encouraging teachers when there was a 14-day strike, and our students lost those 14 days. Governor Cayetano said it was about as appropriate as a quarterback cheering for the opposing team. That was her input into education in our state. The president of Aloha Airlines, at the time it was struggling, wrote me a personal letter to thank me for the support I gave him in getting the federal government to take over the pension system of Aloha Airlines and to save the pensions of the 3,000 employees.
All right, thank you very much. We have Catherine Cruz now, who has a question for Governor Lingle.
Governor Lingle, the U.S. Army recently studied the possibility of cleaning up old ordnance that was dumped in Hawaii waters. Do you support a large-scale cleanup, and if so, at what cost?
I do support a large-scale cleanup of ordnance, and through the use of robotics, I think it's a lot less expensive than it used to be to locate this ordnance and then to pull it to the surface and to destroy it. Our oceans are critically important to our fishermen, to our lifestyle, to our visitor industry. So while it may seem like a large expense, it's something that's worth it to us over the long term because it affects our quality of life, it affects our way of life, and it affects our economy. So I think that technology can go a long way today, can make this actually something that's doable. So I would support an island-wide cleanup of the ordnance.
Thank you very much. Representative Hirono, your rebuttal.
We should make sure that when we clean up this ordinance, that by doing that, we're not going to release harmful particles into our water. So this is a very important kind of endeavor, and I would look for federal funds, and in fact, to help the state do that as appropriate. And in fact, Neil Abercrombie and I sought funds for ordinance cleanup, and we got those funds when we were in the House of Representatives. So at the same time, one of our partners in making sure that our waters are safe is NOAA. And I must say that the Republicans in the House, as well as in the Senate, would cut NOAA funding tremendously. And these are the people who warn us when there's a hurricane or some other weather condition that's coming our way.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go now to Chad Blair, who has a question for Representative Hirono. Chad?
Representative, Hawaii's delegation has long pushed for fulfilling the U.S. government's promise of benefits for Filipino veterans who fought during World War II. How would you help in Washington these aging soldiers and their families who are so richly deserving of compensation?
Well, we actually passed a bill that did provide some compensation, finally long overdue, for the Filipino veterans, and I was a co-sponsor of that kind of legislation. In addition, I am the prime sponsor of a bill that would reunite Filipino World War II veterans with their children, many of whom are in their 60s, with their parents. So this is part of the comprehensive reform, immigration reform that I talked about. I talk with Filipino veterans often, and they know the work that I'm doing in support of benefits for them. In addition, we talk about, they also care about things like the DREAM Act, which the Republicans do not support. And Filipino veterans, Filipinos who are immigrants, they are reaching out to fellow immigrants and saying, we need to hold hands and work very hard to do comprehensive immigration reform and pass the DREAM Act.
Thank you very much, Representative. Governor Lingle, your 45-second rebuttal.
The issue of the promises that were made to the Filipino veterans after the Second World War is not just a financial issue, because most of the veterans are really getting older now. This is a moral issue for our nation. When we make a promise to people and we say, if you stand side by side with us, if you fight with us, if you're willing to die for us, this is what you will receive after the war. And we haven't kept that promise. This has gone on much too long. If I get to Washington, D.C., I want to be the person who's known on this issue. I want my fellow senators, when they see me coming, to know what I'm coming to talk about. It's going to be the ACACA bill. It's going to be this very important issue for our Filipino veterans. It's simply gone on too long. I think I could bring a renewed energy to this issue if I can get elected.
Thank you very much, Governor. We have time for another question. Andrew has a question for Governor Lingle.
Governor Lingle, there's been a lot of talk in the presidential campaign about whether it's appropriate to tax the rich. It's also been brought up in your campaign for U.S. Senate, taxing the rich at a higher rate. At what level of earnings do you consider an individual to be rich, and what percentage of a person's income should go to the government?
Well, this is a terrific question. You know, my opponent likes to talk about the top 2%. They currently pay 60% of all income taxes in the country. I don't think that amount should be reduced. I think they should continue to pay at that level. But I do think it's important to also point out that our tax code is extremely unfair. It's just riddled with loopholes and special deals. And the position I'm taking on taxes is the one that was put forward by the President's bipartisan commission known as Simpson-Bowles. And what they recommend is to take out every special deal under the tax code and then force the United States Congress one by one to vote on those they want to put back so that the public can actually see who's getting a tax break and in what amount. Simpson-Bowles also reduces the number of tax brackets, and I think that's a good idea as well.
And Governor, can I just press you on that point, the income level? What would you consider rich, and what percentage of a person's income should go to the government, both local, federal, state?
Yeah. For our state, it's especially difficult because we're a state of small businesses. And so if you pick a number, and whatever number you pick, and everybody would pick a different number to classify the rich. But in our state, it will often mean that that's a small business because they report that income as personal income. So we're going to need to find a way, if we want to increase taxes on those who have personal wealth versus those who are running a business but report their income as personal income. Otherwise, the businesses in our state get disproportionately hurt under Congresswoman Hirono's plan.
Thank you very much, Governor. Representative Hirono, your rebuttal.
I believe in tax fairness. And is it fair that the richest people in our country pay at a lower tax rate than secretaries, as was pointed out by Warren Buffett? So 98% of the people in our country make under $250,000. They got, this 2% got 80% of the benefits of the Bush tax cuts. That is not fair. And this is why I am such a strong supporter of allowing those Bush tax cuts for the richest 2% to go away, to sunset. Very different position than my opponent. And in fact, I supported the President's bill that would ensure that 97% of small businesses, 98% of our taxpayers would not see their taxes increase. The Republicans in the House voted that down.
Thank you very much, ladies. This concludes our questions for this evening. Now each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for closing statements, and we are going to begin with Representative Hirono. Representative?
I want to thank KITV and Civil Beat for tonight and for all of you watching. Thank you very much. I started this evening by saying, does the Senate race matter to you and your families? That's an important question, because when you set everything else aside, that is the most important question. So in the last hour, I hope that you've heard enough to make up your minds about who you would support. At home, in your own private lives, you set priorities. So a budget for your family, college for your kids, retirement for yourself, maybe a better job tomorrow. When you think about your priorities and your dreams, your vote matters. Are you going to vote for a senator that is tied to the Republicans' agenda? Or are you going to vote for a senator who shares your priorities right here at home? Someone who will work closely with President Obama and Senator Inouye to get things done for Hawaii. I will be that kind of senator. I would lead with my head and my heart, because my heart, my priorities are always with you. And my voice in the United States Senate will always be your voice. I ask for your support. I ask for your vote. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Representative. Governor Lingle.
Thank you for taking the time to watch tonight's debate. The person we send to Washington as our next senator should be a leader, not a follower. My opponent has no history of standing on her own, and her entire campaign has been built on the record of others. Our next senator should be someone with a proven record of getting big things done. I established the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, built quality homes for Native Hawaiians, and created a nationally recognized robotics program. My opponent can't point to one thing she has done that has had a lasting impact on Hawaii. The next person we send to Washington will have to get along with all kinds of people, but my opponent has spent her entire campaign and tonight attacking national Republicans. Even I don't agree with them on various issues, but they're the very people we'd have to work with to get something done. It's just too risky to send my opponent to the Senate. She's not a strong leader, has no history of getting things done, and doesn't work well with others. I know you haven't agreed with me on everything during my 30 years of public service, but you know me and you know my record. I ask for your continued trust and for your vote so I can continue to get things done in Washington for the people of Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you, Governor Lingle. Thank you both for participating in tonight's debate. We'd also like to thank our panelists, Andrew Pereira, Catherine Cruz of KITV4 News, and Chad Blair of civilbeat.com. Also, KITV4's Laura Yamada in our web center, and we want to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in and logging on. The general election is exactly 3 weeks from tonight, so be sure to stay with KITV4 News for complete coverage of Commitment 2012. Our coverage on November, on Election Day, begins at 2 o'clock with Diane Sawyer following the presidential race and other national election news. KITV4 will begin coverage of our local races at 6 o'clock that night. I'm Paula Akana. On behalf of KITV4 News and civilbeat.com, thank you, aloha, and good night.